Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and we'll begin our public hearing on the FY14 proposed budget. I'm Jim Morse. I'm the superintendent of schools since July 1st, and I've had the pleasure of working with this school board, and I'm going to ask the school board to introduce themselves, starting with Ed. Ed?
Megan Turnbull.
John Parsons.
Maria Borith.
Krista Butts.
Tom Newkirk. Al Holland.
And then I'm going to ask my administrative team to introduce themselves, starting with Sue.
Sue Caswell, Business Administrator.
Jay Richard, Principal of Middle School.
And I do feel I would be remiss if I didn't ask Ann Knight to introduce the ABC committee this evening as well. Ann, would you do the honors?
Ann Knight, Chair of the Advisory Committee.
And Rob?
Rob McEwen, I'm on the ABC.
Right. So tonight's presentation is the official public hearing of the proposed FY14 budget. The board's purpose tonight is to hear your questions, your concerns, and your opinions related to the proposed budget. I certainly can answer questions, the administrative staff can answer questions, and the board can answer questions. So why don't we go ahead and begin. So in order to put together a budget that makes sense for our students and for our taxpayers, we obviously would want to start with a set of goals. And this year, the goals that we established were a budget that supports students' needs. Now, very clearly, when we put a budget together, the whole purpose of putting a budget together is to support our students. We also, this board and myself, decided that increased communication with the communities was critical to the success of developing a budget. I would share with you that this is, I believe, the 7th public presentation that I've given on the budget. In addition to 6 prior to this, and this evening, we actually invited the council in Durham and the selectmen and Madbury and Lee to host additional meetings, which will be occurring later in the month. We have put together the brochure that you see this evening to try to pick up some of the highlights. I also would guide you in the direction of the ABC report. They did a wonderful job of putting together an analysis of the proposed budget. And since this is the first time Rob's been in a public meeting with me, when I've talked about it, I want to give him public credit for the graphs that he developed from the work that the administrative team and board have done. They truly are phenomenal. That report is available online. I think it's a very an important tool for the community to look at. So if you're here tonight or you're here at home or you see this at a later broadcast, I would encourage you to go to our website and review that report because it was quite well done. We also, in putting a budget together, wanted to make sure that we were building a budget that would develop broad community support. It's really important in our system to make sure that everybody feels like they're being heard in a qualitative and quality way. We didn't want to shut any group out, any person out. So if you had been in my office from July through the present, you would have seen a whole host of people coming and going, giving me their opinions of the school district and how we're doing and how we're doing with money and how we're doing with budget and how we're doing with academic progress. And that was deliberate on my part because I really wanted to learn about Oyster River. This is my 4th superintendency. I've been doing public education for 36 years. And what I learned in the 21 years I've been superintendent is each of the school systems that have hired me to do this work are completely different than the others. Although I often compare Oyster River to my superintendency in Oakland, Maine. It was 3 towns, much like a cooperative. In Maine, they don't have cooperatives. They have unified school districts. But the concept between Oyster River and the Messalonskee School District were very similar. We also wanted to build in the concept of academic accountability. And Carolyn Eastman, our assistant superintendent, has been working diligently about demonstrating how we could measure student progress in a way that was meaningful. But in addition to that, of course, we wanted to be fiscally responsible. As we go through this budget presentation tonight, we hope that you'll see that these goals show up front and center in all the work that we've done. So a couple of observations as I shared, 36 years as an educator, 21 as a superintendent. I wanted to share some of the observations that I've been able to do over the course of these 6 months. I've never seen school climates as positive as I've seen in Oyster River. If you walk into either elementary school, the middle school, or the high school, you see students that are engaged in learning and teachers who are engaged in helping those youngsters learn. You see administrators who care about how the youngsters are doing, and you see administrators who care about academic performance and working with their staffs. We have a very dedicated staff. It's experienced and, quite frankly, imaginative and innovative. And over the course, as represented by the successful budgets of the past and the support of the community, it's pretty clear that the 3 towns that comprise our cooperative have been very supportive of the school district. In the handout that we gave tonight, there were actually 3, and I hope you got all 3. The newest one is a brochure that our business manager and my administrative assistant spent a lot of time on, and it talks about student performance on the front and the proposed budget on the back. So I think they did a really great job, and again, going back to what we're here for, it's about how well we are doing for our students and what's happening to them academically and what's happening to them as they graduate from our school district. When you look at this brochure, you would see significantly higher SAT scores than you'd see in the nation at large and the state of New Hampshire. So Oyster River is incredibly competitive in terms of how our students are doing on SATs. Oyster River is incredibly competitive in the number of youngsters who are graduating from Oyster River High School. And as much as Todd has disappointed our high school principal by this number, 2 school years ago, we had 100% of our youngsters graduate. In this past year, it was 99.3%. We lost 1 youngster who moved out of the district, and we believe out of state. So our high school is very committed to making sure our students succeed. But for the high school to do its work, the middle school needs to be doing its work. And if we had more space on this sheet for more data, what we'd be able to share with you is that 87% of the youngsters who leave 8th grade are proficient by state standards in math. And if we, again, had more space, I could share with you that 90% of our students leaving grade 2 are proficient in reading. Those are hallmark data that we all should be very proud of. And I know that often in the course of a school year, in the course of conversations, that piece gets missed. So our students are doing well, our staff is doing well, and our administrators are doing a really good job delivering a great program at each of their buildings. The other rumor, if you will, is that we have extraordinarily small class sizes. I've worked with our high school principal and our middle school principal to really analyze what our class sizes are as they compare to board policy. So in making reference to class size, this body and their predecessors have said that we want to see class sizes someplace in the range of 18 to 22. And within that policy, there are exceptions provided to me to work with our administrators when that doesn't occur. So just to give you a sense of class sizes in math at the high school, 20.9, in science, 19.3, social studies at 15.2, English at 16.3, world language at 16.6, etc. on this slide. What I also wanted to share with you is that everything doesn't fall neatly into that 18 to 22 range, and it really represents those students who have needs in the special ed area, and those students who really want to push the envelope academically in AP courses. It also, you'll see smaller class sizes in courses like industrial arts, technology, and I use that language because that's the language we know. It's not the language that is the current language we use to describe that course. Or, for example, the arts, our art classes. So why would those classes, say, be 14 as opposed to 18? Literally, it's the number of stations in a classroom. So if you're taking a shop class at the high school, you have, I believe it's 14 stations? 14 stations. Why wouldn't you put 18 kids in a place that has 14 stations? In that particular classroom, youngsters are using industrial tools, drill presses and lathes that require intense scrutiny by the teacher. The art classes, I believe, also are around the 14 range. I'm looking to Todd in the audience to nod whether I've got this right, and he'll give me an up or down if I don't. Again, it's the spaces that are available when you're doing ceramics. You have so many stations that you can create clay. If you're doing painting, there's so many spaces where the easels exist. So I think that the misnomer in the community is that Oyster River has lots of extra staff. And in my analysis with the administrative team, I can share the data which says that we really don't have extra staff. We have appropriate staff if we're trying to meet the board's policy in terms of range. And clearly that would be something that we would want to be doing. Middle school, Jay worked with me on this, and you can see the middle school numbers on average are a little bit higher than the high school, but they're dead on to the 22, so they're within the range. And when we look at our elementary schools, based on this proposed budget, this is projecting into FY14, Massway will have a class size on average of about 20.35, and Mohermet will have a class size on average of about 21. You can't get much closer than that, and clearly staying true to the board's direction in terms of their policy. But as a district, everything isn't bells and roses. We do have challenges. The first challenge is actually been articulated through the interview process that hired me. It's come up in numerous board meetings, and it's one of the first recommendations from our ABC committee. And that is, we need to have a strategic plan. Without a strategic plan, you know, we're guiding ourselves through board policy, but a strategic plan spells to the community what the priorities are of the district. So that's in process. We started that process just before Christmas. We don't have a capital improvement plan, but we know we have $4 million worth of unmet needs. And they're pretty significant. In this budget, as we go forward, we addressed the life safety issues of that $4 million, but we still have to grapple on how we will deal with $4 million of unmet capital needs. What we have in technology is an aging infrastructure. Now, why is that important? You know, it's the stuff you don't see. It's routers and servers and wires and walls and wireless connections. That all drives the technology that can be used in the classroom. And in 2015, the state is going to expect that our district, along with every district in the state of New Hampshire, will be taking online assessments instead of paper and pencil. So in order to be ready for 2015, this budget proposes investing in the infrastructure of our technology. The other challenge that we face, and this is another group that has worked diligently for the district, a group of volunteers led by Lisa Allison, is our long-range planning committee, and they have articulated how many students we've lost and how many students they project us to lose in the next 10 years. I think the misinformation associated with projecting enrollment is that it's all going to happen tomorrow. The fact is that it'll happen over a 10-year period, and to the credit of the Long-Range Planning Committee and to the school board, they're attempting to address those issues now. And then as we talk about numbers, as we go through this, you'll also see the shifting cost dynamic. I was talking to Ray in the back of the audience before the meeting started, and we were talking about how, you know, state legislators can say, okay, this cost is no longer a state cost, it's now a local cost, and that you'll see that has happened in the past legislature as they determined that retirement costs for teachers would now be a district issue and not a state issue. And then, of course, at the federal level, and again, as we talk about this, the recession that started in 2008 for northern New England is a pretty slow recession for us to get out of, and we're still experiencing those impacts, and we're still seeing funds cut in education at the federal level as well. And there's a real possibility, a high possibility, that next year we either will not get federal Title funds, Title I funds, or it could be the last year we see federal Title I funds. So as the board was ending its budget cycle last spring, it asked the question, what would it take for, what would the impact be if FY14 was a flat budget? And, you know, Sue and I talked about what that meant, the business manager and I talked about what that meant. We didn't know whether it meant that FY13 would be equal to FY14 or that the goal was there would be no tax impact. And as we go through this, you'll see the work that we did to try to accomplish that, but I will tell you up front, we didn't. And I'll have the rationale for why we weren't able to. All of our selectmen and our council have asked us to be fiscally prudent. We've received letters, we've had communication written and both in oral. Can you try to contain the growth of the school budget? The school board has been very focused on containing costs and balancing that need. And then we've had residents in the district who said, you know, the most important thing for me is making sure the quality of the education is there. And ultimately, the challenge for us is we must meet the needs of our students and be fiscally responsible. I mean, the days of us being able to throw money at issues in Oyster River are gone. They disappeared with the advent of this recession. On the other hand, we have an obligation to our students to make sure that the program that their parents had and their parents' parents had is as good tomorrow as it was yesterday. And that really is critical. And I think that's what contributes to our above average SAT scores, our above average graduation rate, our data that shows youngsters are succeeding in the middle school and in the elementary school. So it's not a choice of one or the other. We have to figure out a path that does both. So our initial requests from administrators would have increased the budget by $1,832,501. Administrators and the school board worked incredibly hard to cut that back because that would have been unsustainable growth and it would have crippled our taxpayers. We cut $1,384,452 to bring our total overall increase to $448,049. So I think it's important for the community to know basically how did we get there, but before we get there, let me talk about the loss of revenue. Because a ledger is built by how much money you have coming in and how much money you can spend, and the theory is they would be equal. So you can't spend more money than you have in revenue. However, in the course of developing this budget, we lost $663,245 in revenue. We lost state funds in terms of supporting education in Oyster River, $204,550. So in terms of revenue lost, in terms of impact, whether it's shifting cost or direct cuts in revenue, the impact was $1,315,844. So what did the administration and the school board do to cut back on that growth? We offered a retirement incentive. And as a result of that retirement incentive, 14 staff members came forward and said, we would like to take you up on that offer. We're willing to retire. The concept around a retirement incentive is that if you can encourage those who are age eligible to retire, instead of cutting your youngest teachers, you're removing senior teachers. And in truth, it takes about 2 junior teachers to equal a senior teacher. Well, Oyster River is a great place to work, and we have a lot of staff who are age eligible and service eligible to retire. Of the 14 staff that came forward, my recommendation to the board was not to replace 11 of those 14. We also had a much larger capital improvement request recommendation from ABC than we thought we could sustain in this particular budget. We worked very closely with the ABC to lessen the impact of the request for capital improvement, though I have to share with you that, and this is critical, we increased our efforts towards sustaining our buildings by $191,000 in this proposed budget. And those are the life safety issues that we had to address. We kept the supply accounts to 2012 levels. And what I did with each administrator is we sat down and said, here's how much money you spent in 2012, here's how much money was budgeted in 2013. Looking at the 2012 number, it seemed sufficient based on the balances, and almost in every account we've kept to 2012 levels. And of course, health insurance is always problematic. It's become an astronomical cost, not just for school districts, but for communities and businesses. And we were fortunate. Sue and I estimated that the health insurance cost for the district would increase 10%. They did still increase, but at a far lesser amount than anybody anticipated. It was 1.7%. We can talk about the revenue lost or cost shifting from the state. I talked about the $204,550. That's our adequacy money from Concord. And then the shifting of the retirement costs from the state to the local added $550,000 to our budget. And I talked a little bit already about the potential loss of federal money in Title I. That's $188,000. So one of the other questions we got asked in previous meetings, so, given all of that, what were the major drivers in the budget? And really the major drivers were just three. Our salaries increased by $83,011. It's probably one of the smallest salary increases for a district this size that I've seen. Benefits increased, and this would be inclusive of all benefits, not just health insurance, $360,944. And as I alluded to earlier, we need to invest in our buildings, and we increased the maintenance budget by $191,000 to deal with life safety issues. Alluded to again, and some of this is repetitive, but I think it's important, federal grants potentially down by $188,000. Our fund balance was not but a year ago that our fund balance was $1 million. As we sit here tonight, Sue and I are projecting that it might be around 300. So our fund balance is down $690,000. State cost shift in terms of retirement gross was $518,980. We adjusted it for the staff who accepted the retirement incentive, and that brought it down to $406,365. And then we go back to the adequacy grant and how it impacts each town. The $204,550 based on the state funding formula affects Durham, obviously the most dramatically. That's a loss to Durham of $142,091. In Lee, it's a loss of $24,171, and in Madbury, it's a loss of $38,288. So you can cut, and we did that through the retirement incentive. We also looked for ways that we might increase revenue. And many of you have read in the paper that the district has been involved in conversations with Newmarket, with Barrington, and Deerfield. And we gave Barrington a proposal, and we're in a dialogue with them. Newmarket was looking for us to be able to potentially take all of their students' grades 6 through 12. We couldn't do that because we had a capacity study done, and we don't have the room to be able to accept all of the middle school kids and all of the high school kids. We just don't have the seats. But we have had a good conversation ongoing about the potential, and continue to have the conversation with Barrington and Newmarket and Deerfield about the potential of adding tuition students. And what does that mean to taxpayers in our 3 towns? Well, currently we have 64 students from Barrington, and we have a couple of students scattered from other districts. It brings in a revenue of approximately $800,000, just those youngsters. So that's a significant new revenue stream. As we looked at FY14, we increased that number to a little bit over 90, and we increased that revenue. So tuition students for us, I think, is a viable opportunity, and it's something that the board has directed me to continue to look into. Again, in the rumor mill area, we're not building any new school. We're not building any new middle school with Newmarket. We're not building any new high school with anyone. You know, just trying to kill the rumors while I have the camera and I have the microphone. What we're looking to do is fill seats that we currently have, and working with neighboring districts to do that makes a lot of sense. Another way of cutting cost is improving operational efficiencies, and that's what happened in this building over the course of the summer. And what's the direct impact of improving efficiencies is the proposed FY14 budget actually cuts our utility costs for this building by $92,000. The board has directed me to look at similar efficiencies at the middle school and at the 2 elementary schools. The savings in those 3 buildings won't be anywhere near what we're experiencing here in the high school, because what we learned in the high school experience is the building was never commissioned, and essentially it was on full-on since the renovation. So Siemens has helped us do great work here, and as a result we'll save nearly $100,000 in the proposed budget. And then obviously if we're decreasing energy use, that's going to save us money unless the energy costs go up proportionately, which is always a problem with energy costs. The retirement incentive, 80% of our budget, salary and benefits, is personnel. You know, if we use the board's policy well, we can reduce the number of people we have thoughtfully. And that's really what the retirement incentive was all about. So that retirement incentive netted the district for the upcoming year $538,954. But if we look beyond FY14, we actually cut our personnel costs by over $1 million. Because once you've paid off the incentive, then that cost of having fewer staff goes on and on and on. So it was a great exercise and supported by the school board that reduced real costs. And then the other place, of course, that has been burdensome, not just to our school district, but the entire state and country, is health insurance costs. And beginning 2 years ago, Sue Caswell, our business manager, started negotiating with the board's support, reducing the cost of our health insurance, but not eliminating health insurance. And through negotiations with our transportation group and our para group and our custodian group, we've been able to cut down on the cost of our health insurance through negotiated agreements. And each of those units, and Sue deserve great credit for the work we've done there. In the upcoming school year, we actually plan on looking at different providers. So that's another way that we could theoretically cut our health insurance costs. So in the spring, we alluded to this at the beginning of 2012, our board requested what would the impact of a flat budget be? And you know, it's pretty significant. In addition, now that I'm just going to put that in context, in addition to what we've talked about this evening of the cuts that the board has made, we cut $1,384,452 from the proposed budget. But if we were going to try to make FY13 and FY14 exactly the same, we would have to cut another $1,111,294. And if the intent was there would be no tax increase on top of that $1.3 million, almost $1.4 million already cut, the board would have to cut another $1,315,844. So when you try to balance the needs, the fiscal needs, against the student needs, against the revenue losses and the cost shifting, we weren't able to provide you this evening a budget that equals FY13 to FY14, and we weren't able to get you to no tax increase. But in order to do that, we would have to cut services to kids. So it's a parallel goal, providing quality programming for kids and making sure that we can meet our fiscal needs to our taxpayers. And so the proposed budget this evening, we feel, does that at its current level. We know that we had to be fiscally prudent. We feel like we have done that with the shifting revenue and the shifting costs. Really, every time the board made a significant cut in the budget, there was some kind of offset in terms of loss. You know, the money that we saved through the retirement incentive was completely eaten up by the shifting of the retirement cost to the local community, as an example. The interesting thing is, had we not lost the revenue and had costs not shifted from Washington and Concord, we actually would have met the goal, or been very, very close. I would tell you that when this whole process started, Sue and I, in August, felt like we probably could do what the board asked us to do. But as we went through the fall, we realized we really couldn't. And this is a very lousy slide because there's lots and lots of data, and I try to prevent this kind of slide from being used, but it's really the only way to present it. And I apologize if you can't see it, but it is in the printed material that you received. And it's really just a cost center analysis. And again, I'm going to give Rob credit for doing this work because we lifted it straight from the ABC report. And it's giving you a sense of where the money is being spent by cost center. And I won't go through that because it's too tiny and too intense, but it's there for you. And then in terms of future dates, I guess we could have eliminated December 19th because we've done that. We are here tonight, so that's January 9th. I alluded to meetings being hosted, not held, but hosted by our council in Durham, and that's going to be January 17th. We also, at the council chambers. And then on January 23rd, the town of Lee is going to host us at the Public Safety Complex. And then on February 5th, oops, I missed one. I've got to find Madbury. Durham. It's 28th. Okay, thank you. It's January 28th. The very next meeting that's important in terms of the cycle for the budget is February 5th, and that will be hosted by the board. I won't be the spokesperson that night. Sue won't be the spokesperson that night. The work shifts to them. We'll be there to support them, and hopefully we can continue to have a positive dialogue as we move towards March 12th, which is the actual day that voting occurs for the FY14 budget. So we are at that place where we entertain questions. I do want to share with you that materials are now available on our website. Again, I've alluded to the ABC report, this PowerPoint. Sue will get this triptych up. That's probably not up yet because we just did this today. We'll get that up. And we are at the point of the presentation to turn it over to you and answer your questions. So before we do that, I want to thank you very much for being here. I know that there are many other things that you could be doing, and we appreciate your time. You may direct your questions to me, Sue, and the board, but if the board doesn't have the answer, they may redirect it back to me. And if you would introduce yourself, what I said to Sue today is my common practice is if we don't know an answer to a question, if we know who you are, we can get that to you. So turn it over to you, sir.
I'm John Parsons from Durham. Can you tell me which buildings the 11 positions are being eliminated from? I understand that it's through retirement, but I'd like to know where teachers are leaving and will not be replaced?
Sure. They are not being replaced in every single building in the district. So I'll ask each administrator. I can see that Carrie's here now. We introduced people earlier, and Catherine, so you guys might just want to stand up and wave to the crowd so they can see you in the audience. Catherine and Carrie. Yeah, thanks. So Todd, why don't we start at the high school, and you can go through the high school positions. Sure, I think that's important for the video. Thank you.
Todd Allen from the high school. There are two staff that have taken the retirement incentive, one of which is not going to be filled. It's a business education position that we are able to redistribute course loads and eliminate some of the very small classes, but still maintain and meet student needs in those areas.
Thanks, Todd. Jay, can you do the non-special ed positions? We'll let Catherine do the special ed positions.
Sure, we have several positions. We have a library media specialist that's retired that will be filled. We have a family consumer science position that will likely be filled with a computer-related type position. Sorry, I'm kind of stuck here. I know Catherine will do the two special education positions. We had a custodian that's retiring, that will be replaced. We have a guidance position that's retiring, that will not be replaced. So we'll be going from 4 guidance counselors down to 3. And I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Dennis?
I have a first and second grade teacher who took the retirement bailout. and those positions will be filled by transfers most likely. We don't know exactly from where and when, but that's what will happen.
Gary?
And at Massway, we have 1 teacher retiring, and we also have a secretary retiring and also a paraprofessional retiring. Right now, it's looking like with the class sizes, the enrollment reduced at Massway, we will not need to fill that teaching position. And as Dennis said, we may have some shifting between the 2 elementary schools.
Catherine?
In special education, we have, there we go, we have a retirement at the high school with a case manager as well as 2 case managers at the middle school. Those positions will, the caseloads will be filled by previous current case managers that we have in the district. We will look at caseloads in the spring district-wide and place case managers in the buildings based on what is appropriate to meet the kids' needs and making sure we're meeting the kids' needs. We also have a retirement with our middle school special education coordinator, and we will be shifting our administrative model from a director to an assistant director type model. We have 2 other special education coordinators in the district, so we'll be working with the building administrators, the principals, assistant principals to realign responsibilities.
Thank you for that question. Others who have questions this evening?
I have 2. They're very different, so I'll deal with one at a time. Denise Day, Durham. And my first question is that last year when the board proposed cutting a middle school guidance position, we heard from many people, including staff, why that was a very bad idea, and that proposal was ultimately defeated. Now, once again, a middle school guidance position is being cut, I'll bet by retirement, but it's still being cut, and I'd like to know what has changed between last year and this year to make that proposal acceptable.
In this instance, I'll thank Jay for this information that he sent me today. The state of New Hampshire does have ratios in relation to guidance, and with 3 guidance staff members, we still meet the state's ratios. So just like in the classroom, here's an opportunity to absorb a staff member and not have somebody lose their job. So what's changed is the voluntary retirement between last year and this year. But in terms of the ratios, it fits very comfortably within New Hampshire guidelines.
And then my other question is actually if maybe you could explain a bit more about Articles 5 and Article 6, because I know I'm still somewhat confused by what that actually means for the district.
Okay. So I don't have the articles right in front of me, but here they are. So the state of New Hampshire, in Article 5, passed a law that allows school districts to have a end-of-the-year retention fund. This is something that I have had my entire career as superintendent in Maine. And what it is basically an emergency fund that could be drawn on through the authorization of the school board. So it's not being set up so that that money could be spent willy-nilly. It's really an emergency fund so that the district has a place to draw from should something unforeseen and very expensive occur. An example would be a boiler at this high school would be a $100,000 item easy. And the way that school districts have operated in New Hampshire up until this law is passed is they would have to find the $100,000 from inside their budget. Now, when we're building a budget, as we have tonight for next year, we're 6 months away from implementing that budget. And things do occur in the course of a budget. So it's basically an emergency fund. It's very similar to the same type of fund that towns have in the state of New Hampshire. So the legislature has basically said, school districts, you have our support if you can get your voters' support to create such funds for school systems. So that's Article 5. Then Article 6 is a discussion that is going on with the board right now about a fund that was created a couple of decades ago that was a capital reserve fund. And over the course of the last couple of decades, it's had about $98,000 in it. I think the original intent, as Sue and I have talked about this, was to use this to seed money for building new schools. But as we've looked at it, we felt that we wanted the board to at least have the discussion about going to the voters to release this from a capital reserve account. It could do two things. Well, it could probably do more than two things, but these are the two things that we're talking about. We talked earlier about the $4 million worth of unmet capital needs. It could be used, granted a drop in the bucket on $4 million, to help address some more of those needs. It also could be used for the aforementioned Article 4 to help fund that 2.5%. So it's a fund that was created by voters that is set essentially unused for a very, very long time. And as Sue and I were looking at the work that Siemens did here and the work that we want to do in the middle school and the elementary schools, we saw this as a potential opportunity to release those funds to do that work. It also has the potential opportunity, the board may or may not go along with that idea. They may want to use it as part of the 2.5% reserve account we talked about under Article 5. But in order for the board to carry on this conversation, we needed to have it as part of our conversation tonight. So it sounds like it's non-definitive. The board hasn't made any decisions. The answer to that would be, that's absolutely correct. We just started the conversation at the last board meeting last week. In order for us to be able to have this conversation ongoing with the school board, we needed to present it to you this evening.
We don't quite know what the budget will be because of the deliberative session hasn't happened, but we do know the default budget is about $250,000 less than the proposed budget. Do we know if no wins, how that $250,000 will fall?
So can I paraphrase?
I'm asking if the budget gets voted down, what will happen in schools?
So Ruben's question is, the budget fails, what happens? In New Hampshire, you have what's called a default budget. It's the first time in my experience that I've seen something like this. In Maine, I'll just give you the opposite of what you have. You continue to go out to vote until the voters pass a budget. And I've had colleagues who actually have had budgets passed in April of the year of the proposed budget. And then they're talking about the next budget. So that happens in Maine. New Hampshire's much more sane about this. They said, look, if the voters say no, then you have what's called a default budget. And Ruben has alluded to the fact that that approaches $300,000 and has the less than the proposed budget. And has the board had any conversation about that whatsoever? Only in the sense that Sue Caswell has presented to them what that number would be, but we've had no discussions about the implications. So, you know, that can be a debate whether you should or shouldn't. My recommendation is to discuss it if it happens, because you can unravel a school district by conjecture and saying this is what could happen. I think that it's always wiser to talk with facts. And so the number that Sue shared is a fact. If the budget fails, that's a fact that we have to face, but we have not even attempted to articulate what those cuts would be.
John Parsons, Durham. This is relative to Article 6, or suggested to me by Article 6. And I sincerely hope that the answer to this question is absolutely no. 15 years ago, we created 2 funds that are meant to build a track. While this fund was under consideration, or the removal of money from this Capital Reserve Fund, Facilities Development Fund, was under consideration, was there any discussion of doing the same thing with either or both of the track funds?
You'll be glad to hear, John, the answer is absolutely not.
John Collins from Lee. I have one more question than I thought I did now. Why not? You wouldn't get much for it. John Collins from Lee. On the back of your pamphlet, this one, underneath the important dates for the budget, which I want to ask a question about, it says, while the district is made up of 3 separate towns, it is a single political unit that operates under the rules of RSA 40:13. I'm wondering, I don't expect a complete answer, that would take forever, but maybe a skeletal outline of how the 3 curiously named town budget meetings, Town of Durham budget meeting, Town of Lee budget meeting, Town of Madbury budget meeting, how they came to be, and I'm curious how they fit into, this is a statutorily mandated budget hearing. What exactly those meetings will be? Will they be board meetings? Will the school board be there? Will they be posted meetings? Will they be informational meetings? Who will be running the meetings? Who will be, and importantly, what the role of the school district and the school board and the superintendent will be in those meetings?
I think I can capture that and not be too windy, John. Thank you for asking the question. Okay. They're my ideas. Remember back, my goal was to reach out to a broader constituency. The meetings are my meetings, and the board will be there. I asked if I could go and have a conversation outside of a school venue with the towns, and so they're not council meetings, they're not selectmen meetings. They're really them saying, yeah, Jim, come on over and come to the town hall. They're informational meetings only. This is the required statutory meeting. All of the 7 meetings I've had before this, and the 3 that I'll have at each community, are because I wanted to reach out to a broader constituency. And lots of times people don't want to come to the schools, so it's kind of like, you know, bringing the Mohammed to the mountain and giving, you know, the townspeople, the select people, the council, an opportunity to talk to me. Clearly, you know, they have an interest just like any other constituency, and it's a level of respect that I wanted to extend to them. So it's solely my idea, and you can ask me in a month whether it was a good one.
And you're running those meetings?
I'm going to do the same presentation that I've done tonight, and it'll be, you know, an audience of whoever comes. And, you know, I can't imagine that I would miss you, Ruben. I'm going to be so close to your house, I'm sure you'll come. And, you know, I encourage people to come just because it gives us another group of people to talk to. You know, one of the things that, the most inefficient form of communication is these meetings. But I will tell you, and I say that only in terms of the number of people who are here, but I also think they are one of the most important ways to communicate, because people really want to ask questions to a person, not to a machine, or not get an email. And, you know, whether there's one person at a meeting or, you know, 40 people at a meeting, I think it's an investment worth having. We have the technology, we can broaden our reach through technology, but nothing replaces the ability to ask questions of real life people. And, you know, I'm looking forward to being able to shift the responsibility of deliberative session to the school board, because I'll have been talked out on this budget by then. Not seeing anybody come to the microphone. I do sincerely. Our board chair wants to close. Go right ahead.
Not to close, but to ask Denise Day if you got an answer that you understood and are comfortable with on Article 5. Okay.
I can ask a follow-up to Denise's question, which was, okay, so we assume the voters approve this fund. That doesn't put any money in it. Can you describe how the money gets into the fund?
There's a couple of vehicles the board could use. You know, I alluded to earlier that Sue is projecting a $300,000 balance. I really want to call it a balance and not a surplus. A balance that reflects an active engagement by Sue Caswell, our business manager, to manage this budget, and our school board to monitor the management of this budget. And anything short of a balance, and the people in this room and through our communities would want to hang me by my ears. So we really are being very thoughtful about our expenditures and how we're managing our funds. And remember that we're building this, you know, essentially 6 months before it ever is implemented. So everything that we have here are educated estimates. So having said all of that, I forgot your question, Ruben. my apologies.
How does this new fund get
funded? The funding of this new yeah. It can be done through the board saying, let's put $50,000 of the balance into this account this year. It can be done where the board literally raises funds to fund this balance. So they have a couple of options if the voters approve it.
So, but at the end of the school year, when this balance is known, the board can just vote.
They'll do it before the budget is over, because, you know, once we hit July 1st, we're into FY14. So procedurally, they'd have to indicate that that's their wish before we actually start the new budget. Then the audit happens. Their direction exists, and then we can do it.
And I forgot, I did have another question. Article 6. Yeah, John Collins Lee. I was on the board in '99, and I'm confused. Those two are not related, I guess. There are two different, perhaps David and I were, two different capital reserve funds, or two different funds that in the district that have something to do with setting aside money for capital improvements, or maybe not.
No. There's money that's raised through the process of building a budget for capital improvement. This particular account was set aside by voters many years ago.
Yeah, 99. It says Tom Carroll's, and the idea was to put money in it each year. And so if you could remind me how the money got in there. I think it was in each year a warrant article would ask the voters if they wanted to set aside X number of dollars to put into this capital reserve fund. So
Sure.
that's one,
Yeah.
how the money got into it. I guess 3 questions. One, how the money gets into it. 2, what it would take to spend that money, and if it required a 2/3 vote. And if that's the case, how can you, by a majority vote, decide to just disband it and put all the money in the general fund? And finally, if there is, again, a drop in the bucket, but if there's $100,000 round numbers for capital improvement, instead of just putting in the general fund where it'll probably get lost, why not at least decide to disband, to discontinue the fund and spend all the money at least on capital improvements that are needed. But
Sure.
You could clear up maybe this is the only capital reserve fund and how it got funded. And
yeah. You know, John, I would say, you know, remember at the beginning I said there may be questions that I don't know the answer to, and not being here in 1999 and not knowing the process would be one of those. But as I said at the beginning, we certainly will get the answer to you. In terms of how it was funded and how it was created and all of that, we would have to research that. But we know from our conversations with the district's school attorney that the way to release this money and repurpose it is through the voters. So that part we've researched, but I don't have the history of it, John, and we'll be glad to do that.
Do you know the amount?
Yeah, it's 98,000. So what is 98,000? Do you have it? It's 98,000 and change. Rob, you can't ask questions. You know all the answers.
Rob McHugh, Mabry. I'm on the Budget Committee. I should probably know the answer to this question. On Article 5, the retained funds can be, in any fiscal year, 2.5% of the current fiscal year's net assessment. What is the net assessment?
That is a great question, Rob, and you don't know the answer to it.
I have a follow-up.
Because we don't know the answer to it. We are waiting for the New Hampshire Revenue Service to tell us what that number is, as are all the school districts in the state who have this warrant article.
I presume it's not the town's assessment, the assessed value of the town.
School's assessment.
So that would be, roughly speaking, the budget? So $38 million, 2.5%, about $900,000.
If that's the correct answer, Rob, and the only reason I put the asterisk there is we don't know the correct answer. Again, when I have that from New Hampshire Revenue Services, I certainly will share it and put it in this warrant.
It's a good job you've got some town meetings to explain that. I guess the other question would be, do we know how large that surplus can sort of grow to?
Can't grow beyond 2.5%.
In total? So you couldn't take 2.5% this year and 2.5% next year and 2.5%?
It's absolutely not cumulative.
Okay.
That is the ceiling that it can grow to. Once you reach that ceiling, it can't go any further.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any board members want to add anything to this evening? They'll have their turn. I want to thank you all. Thank you very, very much for your time, your commitment to the district, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.